to the class, and it takes time. Okay, so we cannot do this. If you have started our class in Google Meet, that was okay. But I'm afraid since, I am repeating myself, since, okay, this is time consuming. This is what I said. Okay, this is what I said. You can record your voice and send the file from your part, of course, both you and Ibtihaj, and send them to WhatsApp group. Okay. Actually, having our classes in Google Meet, it's very good, because that will be very clear and without any problem, and it's very easy. But I'm afraid we have to do it in the last previous weeks that we didn't have classes. But right now we are obliged. We have to. It is a must to have our classes in this way, done. I'm afraid. Okay. Now, since we have a great deal of time, let me review what we have done so far about ghosts and about Ibsen's characteristics of works. My suggestion is that I suppose in the previous sessions we have talked about Ibsen and about his realism and the characteristics of his realism, but and the differences between realism and naturalism. So I'm directly moving to Ghost itself. It was published in 1881. Ibsen, who was a Norwegian playwright in 19th century. He lived from 1828 to 1906, and the dates are very important about the moderns, because he is considered to be the forerunner of the modern or realistic drama in Europe. Among the early realists, he was the one who lived longest. He lived for 78 years, and his father was a prosperous merchant, but poverty interrupted Ibsen's youth. He married in 1858 at the age of 30, and he lived for a while in Italy and Germany. Norwegian traditions and myths dominated his plays, and he was a romantic playwright, but became realist after writing his very famous play, A Doll's House. So he has changed his style from romantic writing, which is based on historical events put in romantic way. He turned his style to realism and became a realist playwright. After writing Ghosts and Enemy of the People, another play written by Ibsen, in plays he uses a certain kind of imagism, the use of images to dramatic, to actually intensifies the portrayal of his characters. This is called dramatic imagery because he has used it in his plays. In one of his plays called Wild Dog, and in Hedda Gabler, he uses images, not symbols. That's why he is considered to be a imagist, not a symbolist, as the critics sometimes say. He became famous in Europe more than his own country, Norway. And because he was against the petit bourgeoisie, his ideas resemble the 18th century England and the concept of capitalism. If we want to categorize his works, we can divide his works into 3 periods. So the periods of his works start with the first one is the one before 1875. He mostly wrote romantic plays. After 1875, he moves into the social realist plays. And his third period of his works started from 1892. He becomes most introspective in one of his plays, Master Builder, published in 1892. His attitude in this play is trying to balance spiritual and material life and tries to settle his accounts with life and becomes much more personal and uses more and more imagery in his plays. He was a very ambitious man in Master Builder, of course. He writes about an architect who tries to build the highest building in the town and finally falls down from it. The Wild Dog, as I have mentioned, another play by Ibsen, Hedda Gabler, are transitional plays between his social problem plays and introspective period, which include characters from the both. In spite of his realism, he uses some melodramatic elements in his plays as well. Ibsen was never in England himself, so we cannot say his drama was Victorian, actually, because it was George Bernard Shaw who imitated Ibsen's work, as we have discussed in our previous works, because Ibsen was actually introduced to English drama by George Bernard Shaw. Ibsen directed his plays against the conservative society, facade, manipulation of the society by false morality, and he tries to change the traditions. The forced manacles, he very much emphasizes on the conflict between the codes of the past and the present freedom of the present time that we live in. So this is different from being traditional. This is another problem. No nostalgia, but realist approach to codes of the past as false morality and conservatism. In the works of Ibsen, the idea of power, status, as it was mentioned, role of the sexes get importance. About the same time that women are doing things in the society. Role of the sexes refers to the role of women that are doing things in the society, because in a traditional way they were pushed back in their houses. Relationship within the family stands as a microcosm. We know that when we are going through transcendentalism, which is it's a kind of a school, appeared at the beginning of the 19th century in America, and it deals with microcosm and macrocosm. When we are talking about microcosm, means the small particles that when they gather together, they will become a part of a greater microcosm. So the small parts of, for example, a person, plants, animals, society, everything in the world is a part of a greater macrocosm, an oversoul. So in Ibsen's works, family stands as a microcosm, which means a greater form of the relationship between the family members can be seen in the society. So this is a very small part of the greater whole, which is the society. He is concentrating on individuals, not groups of people. And through the destiny of these individuals, he explains the social problems. Ibsen was most of the time criticized for putting too much of his own, but he answers to this criticism that he is using objective and critical realism, because realism, one of the basics of realism is being objective. The writer, the playwright, the novelist do not intrude in the course of writing. So they should stick to objective point of view, which is usually in the form of novels. It appears as a first-person point of view, and in drama, we can see the playwright does not intrude in the course of his or her play. So he calls it critical realism, as termed by Georg Lukács, the very famous Marxist theoretician. He is a Hungarian Marxist theoretician, and his work about literature, novel, and play are very famous. He calls it critical realism, in which he believes that this is the necessity for a social realistic writing. uh, Ibsen observes and writes his plays. He sees things, the problems in the society, and uh, report them in his plays and write about them in his plays. In this particular work, Ghosts, conscience becomes the representation of the social repressed forces. She wants to be built, to build an orphanage, and this is something that she's very much enthusiastic about. The play Ghost is 3 acts, and it takes place in 17th century. And also it takes place in a country estate in an upper middle class home in Norway. So the setting is quite clearly mentioned. The play, in the first act, the play starts like a traditional tragedy in a crucial point in a protagonist's life, which is the case with all the Greek tragedies. For example, Oedipus Rex, Antigone, Electra, and so forth. Ibsen brings this pattern to the realistic drama, and then through Ibsen, it comes to America and Arthur Miller's modern play, and realism, which also starts at the crucial moment. So imitated from Ibsen, Arthur Miller, the American playwright, uses the same thing in his works. For example, in his plays, for example, A View from the Bridge, or pardon me, or the very famous Death of a Salesman. The same technique is used. Arthur Miller's Death of a Salesman is only a modified realism, for others don't observe the flashbacks other than Willie. Willie is the main character in Death of a Salesman, the father of the family. What happens in this play, I mean, The Ghosts, a girl, and as it was presented in the class by Zahra, a girl and a boy love each other, but this free love has no priority over conservative marriage. And here comes to focus the role of the sexes. But she should get married to an upper class man, and forced by 2 aunts and mother to marry Mr. Alving, who is an immoral man. After a year, she runs away from home to her former love, Pastor Mandors. If you have read the play, you know what I'm talking about. If you haven't, please go and read it, because it is not very bulky. Usually plays are not more than 100 pages, less than that. The man forces her to go back to her husband, and this is terrible. Ibsen's structural drama. Actually, it shows Ibsen's structural drama. The husband, sorry, the lover wants her to go back to her husband. She comes back home, has a child, and discovers her husband's affair with the servant. After that, the husband's daughter, Regina, is born. She sends the servant away and keeps the girl to prevent the scandal and blackmail of Ingestrand. Drinking and being a captain is a Norwegian norm atmosphere, which can be seen and repeated in many plays of the Norwegian plays. Is rainy and gloomy, and that's the reason why people keep drinking. There is no sun, so they have to keep themselves warm and also to entertain themselves. After the captain dies, she has some freedom, Captain Alvin, and she wants to get rid of his money to cut the link of the money that she has received from Captain Alvin, because she thinks that money that she has received is equal to sin with his son. The money goes to charity, protecting unprotected children. And we can see there are many in the play. Herself, her son, Regina, they are all actually being unprotected. The play begins in the crucial points. The orphanage is to open, and Oswald is home. And finally, she can start her own life and calm down her conscience. In Act 2, the play has unity of time and place. It happens in a half day, and it's as we all know, it's a kind of a format of the Greek tradition. It should start and ends in the same day. We should have unity of time and place. The third point here is that play is also not chronological, like Sophocles' tragedies, like Antigone or Thebes or Theban plays. It started with Oedipus Rex, Antigone, and Oedipus in Coriolanus. And the past experience is dispersed and neatly arranged in plot structure and the structure of the dialogues. I right now have noticed. Amjad Khalil, are you a newcomer to the class? because the limitation of the class is 35, and you are the 36 students in the class. Anyway, what are the influences of the Greek tragedy Ibsen gets from the ancients, we can ask. First, it starts at its crucial moment. Second, the play has unity of time and place, as I have mentioned, and the play is not chronological. So these three specifications, characteristics, makes Ibsen's work very similar to the Greek tragedy. Amjad, since I do not have your okay, Amjad. I have found your name. You are in my list, but because of your internet, you could not take part in the class. Okay, so try to take part in the class from now on. Okay, because cross presence is considered as a part of your final mark. Okay. If we learned the story first at the beginning, and then going to the remaining story, which we call an epic narrative. However, by avoiding this, Ibsen presents a melodrama for the whole play, aims at keeping our curiosity awake and active all the time. About the characters in the story, for example, character analysis was mentioned in the presentation. In order to add something to it, we can say that, for example, Pastor Manders, when she returned to him and asked him to help her, and she asked her to go back to her husband, is not a villain, but he may be responsible for the most of the things that happened to Mrs. Alvin by asking her to return to Mr. Alvin. Ibsen portrays him gray, but not black. Not too white, not too black, gray. He could be Romeo, but he didn't choose it. He could own up his way even easily by wrong act, but he didn't. So he is not a villain. He's not a bad person. His conscience is not hurt. He is the prisoner of the codes of the past. And he doesn't understand a woman in need. Since the codes of the society insisted on the official marriage, so it seems that he could not understand and take the responsibility of answering back his beloved woman. In the story, Elvin is also gray as a woman. She's not so white or so black. The contrast concerning about Manders is that he is a true believer in God. Elvin is not. He is the opposite of Captain, who is also a gray character. Again, not a fully villain. Nobody here is a tragic hero. The play is a melodrama. Manders achieves what he wanted in life but never lived, and he is very conventional and conservative and never agrees with her running because he has a religious tendencies. He asked her to go back to her husband because he is your husband, and he didn't risk to accept her and said, okay, if you are not happy with him, forget about being your husband. Then come and live with me. We can live together and become happy and be happy. But since he is religious and conservative and the follower of the conventions of the society, he insists and motivates her to go back to a man that she does not like and love. The Act 1 in the play actually is according to Freitag's triangle pattern, is the exposition. The primary information about the characters, about the setting, about the important pieces of information that we need to know what is going on are given. Act 2 is the development part, is the rising action, and things happen that start to create our, by tying some knots, it increases our curiosity. And in Act 3, we reach into the climax and the resolution. The outcome of the rising action, of course, is the climax or turning point, and it's ended in the resolution, or as it is called, denouement. Denouement means untying the knots. In rising action, we have tying the knots. In resolution, we have untying the knots. Or, as the French says, denouement. It is written denouement, but it's pronounced denouement. The ghost scene is important. It shows the heredity and environment. Upper class men treated with the servant naturally. That was very common in that time in Norway. This kind of thing is quite natural in the traditions of the melodrama plays. And in Act 2 is developing action, revealing the secrets and the burning of the building, if you remember. A possibility of incest, a melodramatic touch, again, for keeping the audience in suspense, in creating enthusiasm, as I have mentioned, in the rising actions. So all of these things happens in second act. The boy's illness that takes place in the midst of the play was the problem of the day. The monument of the falsehood, orphanage, start to burn down. Miss Alving fails to repent the captain. The exposition, the first